In Hungary, Nationalist Prime Minister Viktor Orban has won a large majority in Sunday's parliamentary election. That means he will serve a fourth consecutive term in office, his fifth overall. Orban's Fidesz party is on course to win more than two-thirds of the seats in parliament. The incumbent successfully saw off a challenge from an alliance of opposition parties who united against him. He has faced accusations of eroding democracy in Hungary throughout his 12 years as prime minister and has clashed with the European Union over rule of law standards. Well, let's hear what Orban himself had to say about his victory.
We have won a victory so big that you can see it from the moon. And you can certainly see it from Brussels.
Our correspondent, Fanny Facsar, is in Budapest. Fanny, 6 opposition parties from across Hungary's political spectrum teamed up to challenge Orban, yet he pulled off a resounding victory. How did he do it?
If you ask his supporters, by simply putting the Hungarian interests first, because this is what Prime Minister Viktor Orban was campaigning on, by the way, not only now, but also during the past decade, putting Hungary first. That's been accompanied by a multi-billion euro spending spree before the election. Question is, of course, who's going to pay for it now after the election? This is a question many of his supporters do not pose, but they are rather inclined just to see what they see as a benefit, as a temporary benefit right now: tax incentives, tax rebate for families, a price cap on oil, a price cap on certain food items. All of these things, actually very populistic measures, were trickling into that decision when millions of people have cast their ballot, and the majority of them that led to a supermajority in parliament, actually here behind me, casting the ballot for the ruling Fidesz party for a fourth term in office, for the first consecutive term in office. This is something obviously that's being explained here, however, not only by these domestic measures, but also what's happening in the neighboring country, the war in Ukraine. But on the other side of that coin, populistic measures here or there is also just how much that message by the united opposition alliance, how strong was it really if the majority of people here cast a ballot for Fidesz and not for this united alliance of various opposition parties from left to right.
Okay, the opposition candidate, Peter Marki-Soy, has admitted defeat, but seemed to suggest this was not a fair fight. Let's listen into what he had to say.
We have to acknowledge the fact that this election was won by propaganda and not by honesty or honor.
So is Marki-Soy right, Fanny? Was this election neither free nor fair?
That's for observers to decide, and there were quite a few observers this time around. Alone, OSCE has deployed about 200 so-called short-term observers, a huge full-scale observing mission compared to previous elections, but also there have been thousands of volunteers here in Hungary from the opposition parties observing whether everything is going according to the rule of law. Did it really go according to the rule of law? There have been various reports already yesterday, but also allegations in the run-up to the election yesterday that voter fraud is going to take place. There's no final verdict on that, but if you zoom in on the media landscape in Hungary, the fact that really the message of the ruling Fidesz government really could reach with a much higher potential there, the voters, compared to the representation of the opposition parties and their message, that imbalance, that certainly didn't change compared to previous elections. The final verdict is to come, however, just really how fair this election was that Prime Minister Viktor Orban deems not only fair, but also free. Let's really see what that final verdict is here in Hungary.
Fanny, the war in Ukraine cast a shadow over the election, of course. Talk to us about what role it played in the campaign.
The war in neighboring Ukraine cannot be ignored. It could not be ignored neither by the government nor by the opposition alliance. it really altered actually the political context in which this election took place. And the way the government handled this issue is trying to cater both to those voters who really are more or less conditioned actually to like the fact that Hungary is really very much aligned economically with Russia, but also Prime Minister Viktor Orban was trying to cater to those voters, especially the undecided voters, giving this message of peace, that Hungary is going to stay out of this war. So yes, the war in Ukraine definitely played a role. Whether that actually was the decision-making factor here for Prime Minister Viktor Orban land this supermajority victory in Parliament there behind me is to be decided and analysed. But it certainly didn't hurt him, the war in Ukraine and the political message that he then used to cater various narratives here for the Hungarian audience.
Fanny, thank you very much. Our correspondent Fanny Facsar there in Budapest.